He had lived on that street for nearly 3 years and most people barely noticed him. That was exactly how he wanted it. He was the kind of man who preferred peace and quiet. Every morning he followed the same calm routine. He made a pot of coffee, walked his dog, and sat on the front porch while the sun slowly rose over the trees. The sound of birds mixed with the gentle tapping of Rex's paws on the wooden steps. Rex was a strong Belgian Malinois, always alert but gentle around the people he trusted. The man had trained him himself, and they shared a bond that went far deeper than most could imagine. To others, Rex was just a dog. To him, Rex was family. A friend who had stood beside him in places and moments he rarely spoke about. He didn't talk much about his past. When new neighbors moved in, he greeted them with a polite smile, helped them carry boxes, and then went back to his quiet life. He never mentioned what he used to do for a living or the medals hidden away in a small box in the back of his closet. His past belonged to another world, one filled with long nights, coded missions, and decisions that left deep marks on the soul. After years of serving his country, he wanted peace. He found a small house at the edge of town, surrounded by trees. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. The town itself was calm, the kind of place where people waved at each other while mowing lawns and children rode bikes down the street without fear. To most of his neighbors, he was just the quiet guy with the big dog. They saw him mowing his yard, washing his truck, or fixing something in his garage. He looked ordinary. Jeans, plain shirts, and that steady posture of someone who had seen too much but carried it with quiet dignity. Rex was always with him. Whether they were going for a jog in the morning or sitting outside in the evening, the dog never left his side. The animal had an intelligence in his eyes, as if he understood every word, every silence, every mood. Sometimes at night the man would wake up from bad dreams. In those moments, Rex would come close, rest his head on his arm, and stay still until his breathing slowed again. The dog had been trained for far more dangerous situations, but here, his job was simply to keep his person calm, and he did it perfectly. Life had finally found its rhythm. The man did part-time security consulting work online, trained at a local gym, and helped at the animal shelter on weekends. People there admired how patient he was with the dogs that were too scared to trust humans. He had a way of earning their confidence the same way he had once earned the trust of his team members long ago. But peace, as he had learned many times before, is fragile. It started with a misunderstanding. A new family had moved into the house across the street. They were friendly enough, but they didn't know him well. One afternoon, while the man was fixing his fence in the yard, Rex ran to the edge of the property when he heard a noise. His bark was loud, deep, and protective, the kind that could startle anyone who didn't know him. The neighbor's teenage son, holding a phone in one hand and headphones in the other, got scared and ran inside. He told his mother that the man's big brown dog was going crazy. That was all it took. The mother called animal control first, and when she couldn't reach them, she called the police. She didn't mean any harm. She just didn't understand. The man had no idea any call had been made. He finished his fence, gave Rex a pat on the head, and went inside to cook dinner. He had the same simple meal most nights: chicken, rice, and vegetables. As he cooked, Rex sat near the door, occasionally glancing out the window. The evening air outside was calm. Streetlights flickered on as the sun dipped behind the trees. Inside, soft music played on a small radio. It was one of those ordinary moments that seemed too peaceful to ever be interrupted. He didn't hear the police car at first. The windows were closed and the radio masked the sound. It wasn't until Rex stood up suddenly, ears pointed, tail stiff, that the man noticed something was off. He turned off the stove and walked toward the window. A patrol car had parked in front of his house. 2 officers stepped out, one young and tense, the other older and trying to look calm. They scanned the yard, talking quietly to each other. The man sighed, wondering what could possibly be wrong. He stepped outside slowly, hands visible, and called out in a steady voice, "Everything okay, officers?" Rex stayed by his side, silent but alert. The younger officer's hand went to his holster, a quick, nervous move that didn't go unnoticed. "Sir, is that your dog?" he asked, voice tight. "Yes, he's mine," the man answered calmly. "He's trained and friendly." "What's the problem?" "We got a call about an aggressive animal," the older officer said. "We just need to make sure everything's all right," the man nodded. "He's fine. He barked earlier because someone walked by the fence. He's protective, that's all. The officers exchanged a look. The younger one still looked uneasy, his eyes darting between the man and Rex. The man could feel the tension in the air, like a wire pulled too tight. He'd felt it many times before, on missions before things went wrong. He wanted to keep things calm. "I can put him inside if that helps," he said, gently reaching down to guide Rex toward the porch. But Rex, sensing the officer's tension, hesitated. He stayed close, watching them carefully. His ears twitched at the sound of a radio crackle from their car. "Sir, please step back," the young officer said suddenly, voice rising. The man froze mid-step, confused by the tone. "I'm just putting him inside." "I said step back," the officer shouted, taking a step forward. Rex barked once, loud, sharp, defensive. The sound made both officers jump. That single bark changed everything. The man's heart sank. He raised his hand slightly. "Easy," he said softly. "He's not going to hurt anyone." The older officer reached out, trying to calm his partner. "Let's just talk." Rex barked again, louder this time, his body between the man and the officers. It wasn't aggression, and it was protection. But to someone who didn't understand dogs, especially working dogs, it could look threatening. The man felt his chest tighten. He could read the fear in the younger officer's eyes, that wild, unpredictable kind of fear that leads to mistakes. He had seen it on battlefields, in villages, in alleys halfway across the world. "Fear like that was dangerous, please," he said quietly. "Let me handle him." The older officer hesitated, then nodded slightly. But before he could say anything, the young one spoke into his radio, asking for backup. The man took a slow breath. He knew he had to de-escalate this before things got out of control. He reached for Rex's collar, his movements slow and calm. "It's okay, boy," he whispered. "We're fine." Rex relaxed slightly at the familiar tone. The man took a small step toward the door. He could feel both pairs of eyes locked on him. Then the sound of another car pulling up broke the fragile calm. More headlights flooded the driveway. Another officer got out, hand resting on his belt. The man's shoulders tensed. He hadn't done anything wrong, but the situation was no longer about right or wrong. It was about misunderstanding, fear, and perception. He managed to get Rex inside and closed the door halfway. Through the small crack, the dog's face stayed visible, eyes still locked on the officers. "Officers," the man said carefully, "there's no threat here. My dog is trained. I'm cooperating. Can we please lower the tension?" The older officer looked like he wanted to agree, but the others were on edge. From inside, Rex barked again, just once. The man winced. He knew the dog was only responding to the raised voices and flashing lights, but he could also tell the officers were misreading it. In that moment, the man felt a deep sadness. He had spent years learning how to control chaos, how to stay calm when everything around him fell apart. And now, right in front of his own home, that same chaos was creeping in. Not from an enemy overseas, but from fear and poor judgment right here. He tried one last time to explain. "I'm a veteran," he said softly. "This dog, he's my service partner. He's trained for protection, but he follows my commands." One of the officers blinked, unsure what to say. The younger one still looked rigid, eyes wide. Then the situation froze into an uncomfortable silence. Only the sound of the radio crackling filled the air. After a long moment, the older officer finally spoke. "All right," he said, lowering his hand. "Let's just calm things down. Maybe we can talk this through." The man nodded in relief, though his pulse still hammered in his chest. "Thank you," he said. It took a few more minutes, but eventually the officers realized there was no real danger. They left with an awkward nod, saying they'd follow up with animal control the next day. The man stood on his porch long after they were gone, watching the red taillights fade into the distance. When he finally went back inside, Rex met him at the door, tail wagging slowly, sensing that the tension had passed. The man knelt down, wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, and stayed there for a while without saying a word. He knew this wasn't over. A report would be written, someone might follow up, and stories might spread around the neighborhood. But for now, there was silence again, the kind of silence he used to crave, though it no longer felt as peaceful. He poured himself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at Rex. "You did good," he whispered. "You protected me like always." The dog rested his head on the man's knee, calm once more. That night, as he lay in bed, the man couldn't sleep. The flashing light still burned behind his closed eyes. He thought about how quickly fear could twist an innocent moment into something dangerous. He had seen it countless times in his past life. Now he had seen it on his own front lawn. Rex shifted beside the bed and the man reached down to touch his fur. He took a slow breath, letting the steady rhythm of the dog's breathing calm him. Outside, the street was quiet again. No cars, no voices, no sirens. Just the hum of the night and the faint sound of leaves moving in the wind. He wanted to believe that the worst part was over. That this had just been a misunderstanding. Something that would blow over. But deep down, something told him it wasn't the end. It felt like the start of something much bigger. Something that would test every ounce of calm he had left. The next morning felt heavy. Even though the sun was out and the sky was perfectly clear, the man sat on the porch with a cup of coffee in his hands, watching Rex play in the yard. Everything looked peaceful, yet he couldn't shake the strange weight in his chest. He had learned long ago that peace could turn fragile when people misunderstood one another. He had slept maybe 2 hours. Every time he closed his eyes, the lights from the police cars flashed in his mind. He kept hearing that sharp command, "Step back," and the nervous tremble in the young officer's voice. He didn't blame them completely. Fear could make anyone lose sense, but it still hurt to realize that in his own neighborhood, in his own yard, he had been seen as a threat. Rex seemed fine, though. The dog's energy had returned, running circles around a stick the man had thrown. Watching him play was soothing. It reminded the man that life still had calm moments left. Later that morning, he went into town to run errands. People greeted him the same as usual. A few nods, a few smiles, though he noticed some neighbors glancing at him longer than before. Maybe the police lights had drawn attention. Small towns notice everything. He stopped by the local hardware store to pick up some wood for repairs. The old man behind the counter, who knew everyone by face, smiled at him. "You all right?" "Heard something happen last night," he said, voice casual but curious. The man gave a polite nod. "Just a misunderstanding. Everything's fine." "Glad to hear it," the shopkeeper said. "Good dog you got there." "Smart one," the man smiled faintly. "Yeah, he's one of a kind." He paid for the wood and headed home. As he drove, his mind kept going back to how fast things had spiraled the night before. It was only a few tense minutes, but in those minutes he had seen how little control people sometimes had over fear. When he pulled into his driveway, he saw a white SUV parked by the curb. The words "animal control" were printed on the side. His heart sank a little. He parked and stepped out slowly. A woman in uniform was waiting near his gate, holding a clipboard and wearing a kind but professional smile. "Good morning," she said. "Are you the owner of this property?" "Yes," he answered. "I'm following up on a report from last night," she said. "Something about a barking incident and an aggressive dog?" The man nodded calmly. "That's right. There was a call, but it was a misunderstanding. My dog's trained and under control. I think the officer saw more than there really was." She scribbled notes on her clipboard. "Do you mind if I meet the dog?" "Of course not," he said, motioning toward the yard. "He's friendly once he knows you mean no harm." Rex trotted up to the gate, ears perked and tail wagging cautiously. The woman crouched down, letting the dog sniff her hand. Within seconds, Rex licked her fingers. "Well, he seems fine to me," she said with a smile. "Beautiful animal." "What breed?" "Belgian Malinois," the man replied. He was trained for service. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Military?" He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, something like that." She made another note and handed him a pamphlet about local pet rules and noise complaints. "I'll mark this as resolved," she said kindly. "But just be careful with new neighbors. People get nervous around big dogs sometimes." "I understand," he said. "Thank you for stopping by." She smiled again, petted Rex once more, and left. For a moment, everything felt normal again, but as soon as her car disappeared around the corner, the man exhaled slowly and sat down on the porch steps. He rubbed his forehead. It wasn't about the dog. It never really was. It was about how easily people judged by what they saw, not what they knew. He decided to take Rex for a walk later that afternoon, just to clear his head. They went down the usual path, a narrow trail behind the neighborhood that led to a quiet patch of woods. The sound of crunching leaves underfoot always calmed him. It reminded him of long walks he used to take during his training days, when the world felt simple, even if it never really was. As they walked, Rex stopped now and then to sniff the air, alert but relaxed. The man smiled at how focused the dog still was, even off duty. Old habits die hard. Halfway down the trail, his phone buzzed. It was a message from someone he hadn't heard from in months, an old teammate from his service days. The message was short. Heard you had some trouble. Everything okay? He blinked at the screen, surprised. How did they already know? He hadn't told anyone. Maybe word had traveled through their quiet network of veterans who still looked out for each other. He typed back, "I'm fine. Just a small misunderstanding." The reply came quickly. "You sure? You know how these things go." The man stared at the message for a while before replying, "Yeah, I've got it under control." He put the phone away and continued walking, but a strange uneasiness followed him home. That evening, the neighborhood was quieter than usual. A few houses had lights on, kids played down the street, but people seemed more distant. Maybe it was his imagination, or maybe news had spread faster than he thought. He tried not to think about it. He focused on his usual evening routine, fed Rex, checked his emails, cleaned up the kitchen. Then just before going to bed, he sat on the porch again. The night air was cool. The stars above the trees looked clear and sharp. Rex sat beside him, resting his head on his knee. "You and me," the man said quietly. "We've been through worse," he meant it. But deep down, he also knew that peace was about to be tested again. The next morning, a knock on the door came just as he was finishing breakfast. It wasn't harsh, but firm. When he opened the door, he found 2 officers standing there, not the same ones from before. "Morning, sir," one of them said. "We're here about a follow-up regarding last night's incident. We just need to verify a few details for the report." The man nodded, stepping aside slightly. "Sure, come in." They entered politely. Rex stayed in the kitchen doorway, watching quietly. The man gestured for him to stay, and the dog obeyed. One officer, a tall woman with a calm tone, asked routine questions. How long had he owned Rex? Was the dog licensed? Had there been any previous complaints? The man answered everything clearly, showing proof of vaccination and registration. When the questions were done, she gave a small nod. "Everything seems fine. I think the confusion last night was due to the initial caller's report. We just have to close it out properly." The man appreciated her professionalism. "I understand," he said. "I just hope it doesn't happen again." As they left, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth," she said, "you handled it well. Not everyone stays calm under that kind of pressure." He smiled faintly. "I've had some practice." After they left, the man stood by the door for a long time, feeling both relief and exhaustion. It wasn't the first time he'd been under scrutiny, but it felt different this time. It wasn't about combat or missions, and it was about everyday life and how quickly people could misread a moment. Later that week, he noticed something strange. A local journalist had posted on social media about an incident involving police and a service dog. The post didn't name anyone, but the details were close enough that people in the area would guess. The comments were full of opinions, some defending the police, others criticizing them, many simply curious. He didn't like attention. The last thing he wanted was his life turning into a topic online. So he stayed quiet. He avoided responding or explaining, but life had a way of stirring things up again. A few days later, while he was out running errands, he saw the younger officer from that night at the gas station. The officer recognized him too. There was a brief, awkward silence as they both stood by their vehicles. Then, surprisingly, the young man walked over. "Hey," he said quietly, "about the other night. I just wanted to say sorry. I overreacted. I didn't mean to." The man looked at him, studying his face. He could see the discomfort there. Not just guilt, but confusion too. The kind that comes from realizing how fear can twist judgment. He nodded slowly. "I know, fear gets the best of people sometimes." The officer looked relieved. "Thanks, I'm still learning. I guess I should have listened more." "You'll learn," the man said. "Just remember, not everything that looks dangerous actually is." The officer gave a small smile and left. When the man got home, he sat down with Rex again. "Maybe that's a good sign," he murmured. "Maybe things can still turn around." But as he said it, his phone buzzed again. This time, the message wasn't from a friend. It was an email from a law firm he didn't recognize. It mentioned a formal notice regarding the incident and potential review by the department's internal affairs. He read it twice, confused. He hadn't filed any complaint, and yet something was moving behind the scenes. He closed the laptop and looked out the window. Rex stood in the yard, watching a squirrel climb a tree, tail wagging lazily. The man smiled despite the unease. "Don't worry," he said softly. "We'll handle whatever comes." That night he couldn't sleep again. The thought of his quiet life being pulled into something bigger wouldn't leave his mind. He didn't want trouble, but trouble seemed to have a way of finding him, just as it always had before. As he lay there, he thought about the years he had spent in service, about all the times he had to stay calm when everything around him broke down. Those skills were still with him. They had to be because deep down he could sense it. The incident wasn't truly over. It was only the beginning of something much larger, something that would test his patience, his past, and his ability to stay the calm man he'd fought so hard to become. Outside, Rex slept peacefully by the door, the soft rhythm of his breathing steady and safe. The man turned toward the window, staring into the dark. Somewhere beyond those quiet trees, a story was already forming, one that neither he nor anyone else had planned for. He took a deep breath, whispering almost to himself, "Let's just make it through tomorrow." And with that, he closed his eyes, not knowing that the next few days would change everything he thought he'd left behind. The morning felt colder than usual, even though it was early autumn. The man stood in his kitchen waiting for the coffee machine to finish brewing, lost in thought. The email from the law firm still sat in his inbox, unanswered. He didn't know who had sent it or what they truly wanted. All it said was that there was an ongoing review about the incident involving local law enforcement and a civilian service animal. He had seen enough investigations in his life to know that reviews like that could spiral out of control if people didn't handle them carefully. He had done nothing wrong, but that didn't always matter. He had learned long ago that truth often came second to perception. Rex sat by the door, tail gently tapping the floor, watching his every move. The dog could always tell when something was bothering him. "It's okay," the man said quietly. "Just a little noise. We'll get through it." He poured the coffee into a mug and walked outside. The morning air carried the smell of wet grass. The neighborhood was waking up. Cars starting, kids waiting for the school bus, a jogger passing by with headphones on. It looked peaceful, almost too normal for the tension quietly growing under the surface. He checked his mailbox and found a white envelope with an official seal. It was from the local police department. Inside was a short letter explaining that an internal review was underway and that he might be contacted for a statement. It sounded formal but polite. He sat on the porch reading it twice, then folded it carefully. Rex rested his head on his leg. The man sighed and rubbed the dog's ears. "Guess we're part of something bigger now, huh?" He wasn't angry, at least not yet. More than anything, he felt tired. Tired of having to prove that peace didn't mean weakness, that calm didn't mean ignorance, and that silence didn't mean guilt. Later that day, he went into town to meet an old friend who ran a small diner near the main street. They'd known each other for years, not from the service, but from the quiet life afterward. The diner owner, a kind man with a worn smile, waved as soon as he walked in. "Hey there," the friend said. "Coffee's on the house today." The man smiled faintly and sat at the counter. "Appreciate it." They talked about normal things at first. The weather, the game last night, how the diner had been busier lately. But eventually his friend leaned closer and asked, "I heard a bit about what happened. You doing okay?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "Just a misunderstanding. But now it looks like they're reviewing it." His friend shook his head. "Figures. You know how it goes. Something small turns into paperwork, and paperwork turns into politics." The man nodded. "Yeah, I've seen that before. You need anything?" The friend asked. "People around here respect you. They just don't know what really happened." "I'm fine," the man said. "I just want to keep things calm." His friend gave him a long look, then smiled again. "You've always been calm. That's your superpower." The man chuckled softly. "It's just practice." He stayed for another cup of coffee before heading home. As he drove through town, he noticed more people seemed to recognize him. A few gave nods of respect. Others whispered among themselves. It was strange how fast word could travel when people thought they knew a story. When he reached home, a black SUV was parked across the street. A woman stepped out, dressed in casual business clothes, holding a folder. She waved politely. "Mister," she said, introducing herself. "I'm from the city attorney's office. I was hoping we could talk for a few minutes if you have time." He hesitated but nodded. "Sure, come on up." They sat on the porch. Rex stayed close, lying beside the chair but watching carefully. The woman smiled when she saw him. Beautiful dog. I read he's a service animal? Yes, the man said. He served with me. I see, she replied. Well, I'm here to gather some information about the incident last week. This isn't an interrogation. I just need to make sure we understand your perspective before the review moves forward. He nodded. I appreciate that. She asked calm, careful questions. When did the officers arrive? What did they say? How did Rex respond? The man answered everything honestly, but kept his tone even, respectful. He didn't want to make enemies. He just wanted the truth to be clear. When she finished, she closed her folder. Thank you for your time. I know situations like this can be frustrating. He nodded. I just want to make sure no one else ends up in the same position. That's understandable, she said. We're not trying to cause trouble. We just need to make sure procedures were followed. She stood to leave. Rex wagged his tail once as if sensing the calm returning. After she left, the man sat there for a while, thinking about her words, procedures. He had lived by procedures most of his life, by plans, codes, orders. But the problem with procedures was that they didn't always protect people. Sometimes they protected mistakes. He thought about calling one of his old contacts, maybe someone who could explain how to navigate situations like this. But then he reminded himself that this wasn't a battlefield. It was just life. Ordinary, complicated life. That evening, he went for another walk with Rex. The air smelled like rain, and dark clouds were gathering. As they walked past the houses, he saw curtains move slightly, neighbors peeking out. He tried not to notice. When they reached the park, he sat on a bench and threw a ball for Rex. The dog sprinted after it with the same energy as always. Watching him made the man smile. No matter what happened, Rex never carried the weight of the world. He just lived in the moment. The man wished he could do the same. After a while, a familiar voice called from behind. Mind if I sit? He turned. It was the older officer from that night, the one who had tried to calm things down. Sure, the man said, gesturing to the bench. The officer sat down, removing his cap. I wanted to talk, he said. I heard about the review. Things are getting a bit bigger than we expected. I figured, the man said. That's how these things usually go. I want you to know, the officer continued. I told the department you handled yourself with complete calm. You didn't raise your voice, didn't escalate anything. I said that in my statement. The man looked at him, appreciative but cautious. Thank you. I'm not looking for trouble. I just want this to end peacefully. I believe you, the officer said. But sometimes, once these things start, they have a way of pulling everyone in. Reporters, lawyers, community meetings, it all spins faster than anyone expects. The man nodded slowly. I've seen that before too. They sat in silence for a moment, watching Rex chase the ball again. The rain started falling lightly, and the sound of it on the leaves was oddly comforting. You know, the officer said quietly, I did a little reading about service dogs like yours, what they go through, how they're trained. It's impressive. I wish more people understood that. The man smiled faintly. They're more than pets. They're partners, the officer nodded. I can see that. They talked a bit more, mostly about ordinary things. The weather, the park, how the world seemed to move too fast nowadays. When the rain grew heavier, they both stood. Take care of yourself, the officer said as he left. You too, the man replied. By the time he got home, he was soaked but strangely at peace. Maybe, he thought, not everyone misunderstood. Maybe some people still tried to see beyond first impressions, but peace didn't last long. That night, his phone started buzzing again. Dozens of messages, some from friends, some from unknown numbers. Someone had posted part of the police body camera footage online. It didn't show anything dramatic, but the internet didn't care. People started arguing, debating, making assumptions. He turned the phone face down on the table. Rex looked up at him, sensing his frustration. Don't worry about it, the man said softly. We'll stay calm. That's what we do. But as he sat there, listening to the rain against the window, he couldn't shake the feeling that calm might not be enough this time. The next few days blurred together. More reporters started calling. The police department released an official statement saying they were reviewing procedures for handling service animals. Some people praised it. Others said it wasn't enough. The man didn't speak to the media. He didn't post online. He spent his time walking Rex, fixing things around the house and staying quiet. One afternoon, while he was sitting on the porch, a young reporter showed up. She was polite, soft-spoken, and said she wanted to share his side of the story. He thought about it for a while, then finally said, "There's not much to tell. My dog barked, they got scared, and now everyone's talking about it. I just want people to understand that not every loud bark means danger." She nodded and thanked him. Her article later painted him as a calm and disciplined veteran who showed restraint in a difficult situation. He hadn't wanted attention, but at least she had written the truth. That night, as the sun set behind the trees, he felt something he hadn't felt in a while. Hope. Maybe the truth could still matter. Maybe understanding could still win over fear. He sat quietly with Rex beside him, both watching the last bit of light fade from the sky. The sound of crickets filled the air, and for a brief moment everything felt simple again. But deep down he knew this was only the middle of the story. The real challenge hadn't arrived yet. The review would soon turn into hearings, and hearings would turn into decisions. And when that time came, he would have to decide whether to keep quiet, as he always did, or to finally let people know who he really was and what he stood for. For now, though, he simply patted Rex's head and whispered, "We'll face it when it comes, buddy. Just like always." Rex leaned against his leg, eyes calm and loyal. The night was quiet, and for a little while, that was enough. The review hearing was set for the following week, and though the man tried to keep his days normal, there was a quiet tension that followed him everywhere. It was in the way neighbors waved with uncertain smiles, the way people paused before speaking to him, the way strangers slowed down their cars as they passed his house. He didn't blame anyone. Most people were just curious, but curiosity could sometimes feel like a weight pressing against his peace. He spent that morning like any other. Early coffee, a short-run breakfast, and a walk with Rex. The sun was warm, the sky clear, and for a few precious moments, everything felt simple again. Rex ran through the grass, chasing a stick, his tongue hanging out, full of life. Watching him made the man smile. That dog had been through so much with him, and still he greeted every day like a new adventure. When they got back home, he found another letter waiting on the porch. It was from the city. The hearing was confirmed for Friday morning. He was invited to attend, though not required. He folded the letter slowly and placed it on the kitchen table. He already knew he would go. He had never been one to hide when it came to standing for truth. That night, he called one of his old teammates from the service, someone who had always given honest advice. "You think I should say something at that hearing?" the man asked. His friend was quiet for a moment. "If you stay silent, they'll fill in the blanks for you. But if you speak, keep it simple. Tell them what happened. Tell them what Rex means to you. Don't go in angry, go in honest." "That's the plan," the man said. "Then you'll be fine," his friend replied. "You've dealt with far worse than a room full of people in suits." The man smiled faintly. True. They talked for a while longer about old days and old memories that were both painful and comforting. When the call ended, the man felt calmer. He looked at Rex lying near the couch, head resting on his paws, and said quietly, "We'll handle this our way, steady and calm." The next few days passed slowly. He avoided watching the news because it only made his stomach twist. Every channel had an opinion. Every headline seemed louder than the truth. The online discussions had turned wild, full of strangers arguing about things they didn't understand. He stayed focused on his routine. That was his anchor. He trained at the gym early in the morning, worked on his small consulting projects, cooked healthy meals, and spent time with Rex. Routine kept his mind still. On Thursday night, before the hearing, he went for a walk at dusk. The air had that soft chill that comes before autumn truly arrives. He walked to the small lake near the edge of town, the same place he often went to think. Rex walked beside him, every step in sync. He sat on a bench by the water, watching the ripples move under the fading light. The reflection of the sky turned gold and pink, calm and endless. He thought about all the years he had spent serving his country, the long nights, the orders, the silence afterward. He had faced danger before, but this was different. This was about perception, about how quickly a person's identity could be misunderstood. He had always believed that action spoke louder than words, but now he wondered if people even listened to actions anymore. Rex nudged his leg gently. The man smiled and scratched behind his ears. "You always know when I'm overthinking," he said. When they got home, he packed a few papers for the hearing: Rex's training certification, his own veteran ID, and the original report from Animal Control clearing any wrongdoing. He wasn't trying to prove his worth. He just wanted clarity. The next morning came quietly. He wore a simple shirt and jacket, nothing fancy. As he got ready to leave, Rex followed him to the door, tail wagging. "You stay here, buddy," the man said softly. "I'll be back soon." Rex tilted his head as if understanding, then lay down by the window, watching him leave. The drive to City Hall took about 20 minutes. He parked a little distance away, preferring to walk the rest of the way. The building stood tall and gray, surrounded by people, reporters, bystanders, and a few familiar faces from the community. Cameras clicked. Questions floated in the air, but he kept walking steadily, eyes forward. Inside, the room was bright and full of murmurs. At the front sat the review panel. 3 officials, one from the police department, one from the mayor's office, and one from a civilian oversight board. The 2 officers from that night were also present, sitting quietly to one side. The man took a seat near the back, waiting for his name to be called. When it was his turn, he walked to the table at the front. The room fell silent. "Sir," one of the officials began, "we appreciate you coming in. We'd just like you to share your account of the events that took place outside your home last week." He nodded. "Of course." He spoke clearly, calmly, never raising his voice. He described what had happened from start to finish: the misunderstanding, the tension, the fear he had seen in the younger officer's eyes, and how easily the situation could have turned worse. He didn't blame anyone. He didn't use big words or emotional speeches. He just told the truth. "I served for many years," he said softly. "I've seen what fear can do to good people. I know how fast it can turn a moment of confusion into a lifetime of regret. My dog wasn't a threat. He was doing what he was trained to do: protect without attacking, alert without harm. I hope this helps you understand what really happened." For a moment, no one spoke. The room stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy but respectful. Finally, the woman from the oversight board said, "Thank you for your composure and for sharing this with us. We're deeply sorry for what you experienced." He nodded slightly. "Thank you. I just want this to lead to better understanding, for both officers and citizens." When he finished, he stepped aside. The officers gave their own statements, both admitting the situation had escalated faster than it should have. The older officer's voice shook slightly when he said, "He was calm. More calm than we were. I respect that." The hearing lasted about an hour. When it ended, the man walked outside into the sunlight. Reporters rushed forward with microphones, shouting questions, but he only said one thing before getting into his truck: "I believe in peace. That's all I want." The following week, the review board released their findings. They confirmed that no laws had been broken and recommended new training for handling service animals and communicating with veterans. It wasn't a dramatic outcome, but it was fair. The man read the statement once and set it down. He felt neither victory nor anger, just relief. Maybe in some small way something good would come from all of this, but peace didn't return right away. The story had already spread far beyond his control. News channels kept revisiting it, showing clips of him walking out of the hearing. People online debated his calmness as if it were a mystery to be solved. Some praised him, others doubted him. He ignored it all. He focused on small things: fixing the garden fence, cleaning the garage, taking Rex to the lake. He didn't need the world's approval. He just wanted to breathe again. One afternoon, the older officer stopped by his house. He wasn't in uniform. He just wanted to talk. "I wanted to thank you," the officer said, "not just for how you handled that day, but for what you said at the hearing. You reminded me why I joined the job in the first place." The man nodded. "We all get lost sometimes. What matters is that we find our way back." They shook hands, a quiet, mutual understanding passing between them. That night, as the sun went down, the man sat on the porch with Rex beside him. The neighborhood had started to feel normal again. Kids played in the street, someone was grilling nearby, and the sound of laughter carried through the air. He looked at Rex, who was watching the horizon, alert as always. "You kept me grounded," the man said softly. "You always do." The dog turned his head and wagged his tail once, as if to say he understood every word. For the first time in weeks, the man felt his shoulders relax. Maybe,